Is it true that some tribes used to eat gorilla meat? I can't believe anyone would do that. They're so close to humans. It's taboo for a reason. But I'm still curious about the cultural reasons behind it. Scroll through the comments of any article touching on indigenous foodways and you'll find these kinds of reactions. The idea of consuming gorilla meat sparks outrage, fascination, and curiosity in equal measure, but few truly understand the deep-rooted history behind it. This is not just about eating meat. It's about survival, belief systems, colonial interference, and the erosion of cultural memory. Let's take a journey into the heart of Central Africa, not just through its geography, but through time, into the minds and customs of forest-dwelling peoples, whose traditions have long been misunderstood. The dense rainforests of Central Africa, spanning parts of modern-day Cameroon, Gabon, Republic of Congo, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, have long been home to indigenous hunter-gatherer groups such as the Baka, Aka, and Mbuti. These people are often labeled as pygmies, a term now considered pejorative, but they refer to themselves and each other by names that connect them to the forest itself. For them, the forest is not just a resource. It is a living, breathing spirit. Every plant has a use. Every animal a story. Their entire worldview is rooted in symbiosis. The gorilla in this tapestry is not merely an animal. It's an ancestor, a messenger, sometimes even a spiritual twin. Yet, despite this reverence, there are stories, whispered, guarded, of times when the taboo was broken. Gorillas are not common prey. Unlike monkeys or duikers, they are intelligent, strong, and rare. Hunting one is risky and, in many communities, forbidden. But in times of extreme hunger, drought, displacement, or failed hunts, necessity overrides taboo. Older members of forest communities recall moments from their youth when an elder might authorize the hunt of a gorilla. It was not a festive event. It was solemn. There were rituals, chants, and sometimes even offerings to appease the spirit of the slain creature. The meat was distributed carefully. Often, elders or ritual leaders ate it first, and certain parts were never touched. European colonizers, upon hearing of these acts, sensationalized them. In reports and letters, they painted the forest people as savages. They stripped the events of context, ignoring the sacredness with which the act was treated. Missionaries and colonial administrators in the 19th and early 20th centuries documented these communities, often through a lens of judgment and cultural superiority. When they encountered evidence of gorilla consumption, it became fodder for exotic horror stories. But anthropologists, who later lived among these communities, began to understand the deeper narrative. The act of killing and eating a gorilla was never about dominance. It was about desperation, ritual, and deep connection. It was an exception, not a rule. The tragedy is that the colonial gaze not only misunderstood but reshaped these practices. As colonial economies took hold, bushmeat became commodified. What was once a rare, symbolic act became a commercial exchange. And gorillas, like other wildlife, began to disappear at alarming rates. In many traditional stories, the gorilla is portrayed as a mirror to the human. Some legends say they are humans who chose to remain in the forest while others became civilized. Others suggest they are watchers, protectors, or even reincarnations of ancestral spirits. When one was killed, and only when absolutely necessary, a series of steps followed. The body was washed, prayers said, and only select people allowed to butcher the animal. The meat would be cooked slowly, often with bitter herbs, and shared in near silence This wasn't just a meal, it was a ceremony. Much of this knowledge is fading. Today, younger generations are more connected to urban culture, often unaware of the deeper meanings behind these acts. Yet elders still remember, and some whisper the old ways to those who listen. Modern conservationists warn of the dangers of hunting gorillas, not just for the species, but due to the risk of zoonotic diseases like Ebola. Ethical concerns also abound, given the gorilla's genetic closeness to humans, and yet we must be careful not to flatten indigenous traditions into caricatures of cruelty. The story of gorilla consumption in Central Africa is complex. It is a story of spirituality, colonial trauma, survival, and deep respect, not mindless brutality. To erase that history is to erase the voices of the people who lived it. The ritual didn't end with the hunt. It continued into the kitchen, or more accurately, the clearing beside the fire. Preparing gorilla meat wasn't just about making it edible, it was a sacred culinary act. Let's follow one such rare moment, reconstructed through oral tradition and anthropological memory. The butchered gorilla parts, typically the limbs, chest muscles, and sometimes organs like the liver or heart, were handled only by elder men. Women, in some traditions, were not allowed to touch the meat. First, the meat would be smoked slowly over a low fire. This served two purposes: preservation and spiritual purification. The smoke, infused with bark from sacred trees, was believed to cleanse the animal's spirit and prepare it for safe consumption. Meanwhile, a paste would be prepared with ingredients like crushed wild garlic, bitter leaves, palm oil, red bush pepper, salt from evaporated plant ash, and fermented root mash. These ingredients were ground together using stone tools and mixed into a thick aromatic sauce. The meat, after smoking, would be boiled in a large pot with water and the herb paste. This stew simmered for hours, drawing out deep, earthy flavors. Occasionally, tubers like cassava or yam would be added, along with unripe plantains. No metal was used in stirring, only wooden paddles carved for ritual use. Some groups even required a prayer to be spoken each time the stew was stirred. As the aroma deepened, the forest grew quiet. Elders would sit in a circle, faces solemn. No one spoke loudly. When ready, the stew was served with fufu, a dough made from cassava, and eaten communally. The heart of the animal was often reserved for the elder who authorized the hunt, or the spiritual leader. This was not food. This was communion with the forest, with ancestors, and with the memory of the gorilla itself. For some, the consumption of gorilla meat was believed to confer strength, wisdom, or protection. For others, it was a necessary burden carried out in the name of survival. In either case, the act was steeped in meaning. The rules were strict, the intentions serious. This wasn't delicacy, it was duty. Today, traditional preparations like this are almost never done. Conservation laws, modern ethical standards, and dwindling gorilla populations have rightly led to the end of this practice in most areas. But the story must still be told, because behind every faded recipe is a culture trying not to be forgotten. And in that silence, there's a kind of reverence, not for the act, but for the lives entangled in it. What's often missing from external accounts of these communities is the full emotional and spiritual weight these acts carried. Those who participated in the ritual were not boastful. Some carried it as a burden for life. A few even performed atonement rites afterward. believing they had disrupted a balance that would now demand reparation. There are stories of hunters who refused to eat the meat even after the kill, of those who, years later, described vivid dreams of gorillas speaking to them, warning them, forgiving them. These are not the details you find in anthropological summaries. These are confessions told under moonlight, over coals, from one whisper to another. In some rare cases, the bones of the animal were returned to the forest, placed in specific patterns, or buried under sacred trees. This symbolic rejoining of body and land was thought to complete the cycle. Life taken, life returned. Even the children who watched from a distance were taught to feel the gravity of the moment. They were told stories of the great spirits. They were warned never to laugh during the preparation. In silence, they learned reverence. Today, descendants of these traditions face a different kind of silence, the silence of memory fading. The elders grow fewer, and those who remember carry more than stories. They carry identity. They carry caution. And sometimes they carry guilt. Not for what was done, but for what has been forgotten. It's tempting to look at these stories through a modern lens and ask only, how could they? But a better question, a more human question, might be, why did they feel they had to? This was not consumption born of conquest, it was ritual born of relationship between human and forest, between hunger and taboo, between past and present. And as we peer into that relationship, the echoes are not of savagery, they are of sorrow, survival, and a sacred complexity we may never fully grasp.